So the new iPhone 16 and 16 Pro have been out for a few months now, and I've been using the Pro phone since nearly release. And it's no surprise that this launch has been pretty underwhelming, mostly due to Apple's failed Apple Intelligence promise. It's December at this point, and most of the features are still in beta. And even then, I've seen some pretty hilarious bugs online. But I decided to use the phone like a typical user, and therefore not opt for the beta. So I won't be talking about Apple Intelligence much in this video, just what's out now. But I do plan on making another update video in the future, so subscribe if you're interested in that. Firstly, I have the new Desert Titanium color, which I think looks great. Certainly not the color that was leaked before launch, thankfully. It has a slight pink hue to it that doesn't show on their website, so if you want to see what it really looks like, it's best to look at it in person. The rest are just the natural titanium, black, and white, same as last year. To be honest, I think the base iPhone has much more compelling colors this year, which, as you'll see, will become a theme of this video. So let's start with the hardware first then, with the most obvious change being the camera control button. When I first used the camera control button, it was pretty hard to get used to because there are two presses you could do. A light press, which is basically to navigate around the settings, and a hard press, which is like physically pressing the button down to take a picture or a video. I describe it like a trackpad on a laptop. For instance, you can swipe around to select a setting you want to adjust, light press to select it, adjust it as you wish, and then double light press to leave. And at any point, if you just press all the way down, you'll take a picture. And I later discovered that you can adjust the firmness of it in the accessibility settings. Getting used to the light press versus hard press thing took a while. Also, it's placed in a spot that makes it, in my opinion, impossible to use in portrait mode. I think it would have been much better to place it basically where the power button is now, if anything a little bit higher, and then move the power button up on top like the iPods from back in the day. That way it would have been good to use in landscape, portrait, and left-handed. But even after getting used to it now, almost everything it offers is easier to do on the screen than on the button. Zooming, for example, or changing the camera is right in front of you on the screen. Even changing the exposure is like 2 clicks away. So I never really use it except to actually open the camera. You can also make it open apps like Instagram and Snapchat, but that's not very useful to me. So essentially, for now, it's just a camera shortcut, and you also don't need to upgrade to the Pro for it since the base phone also has it. The display is slightly bigger because the bezels are thinner, and it is noticeable. They say the display is tougher, which I'm not going to test because I did pay for this phone, but I'm sure YouTubers like JRig Everything will test that for you.
I fear no man, but that
Jerry rig everything.
it scares me.
Most importantly to me though is that the display goes all the way down to 1 nit of brightness, which is really great when using my phone at night, so my eyes don't get blinded. Except when I try to lower my brightness, I realized that it doesn't actually get that low. Then I discovered that for some reason they hid it as an accessibility control panel setting. Now, if you ask me, that's just dumb. I should be able to just slide my brightness down, but even if I agreed that it should be a separate setting, why not put it here alongside the other additional brightness settings that are already there, instead of making me waste an additional control panel space? It just feels tacked on. By the way, there are a lot of cool things under accessibility settings, but I'll be making a long-term iOS versus Android video where I go a lot more in-depth about that, so for now, here are some of the software changes that came with this phone. The most noteworthy being Photographic Styles. You might remember a version of this being introduced on the iPhone 13, but this time you can adjust the styles themselves a lot more, and you can even apply them after the fact. You can pick any preset, and then adjust the tone and color of each preset, and you can have it saved so that every time you open the camera, it shoots in that mode. I really like this feature and I appreciate any way I can personalize the camera to my liking. Unfortunately though, I noticed that the photographic styles don't actually apply to video, just photos. So if you set up your perfect style on photos, it won't actually transfer over to videos. Now, even though it seems Apple could easily bring this to, or some of these styles, to their older phones, a lot of these are new and exclusive to the 16 generation. On their website, if you go to compare the iPhone 16 series to any older iPhone, it says latest generation photographic styles versus just photographic styles for the older ones. Now I noticed that Apple talked a lot about performance and gaming in their keynote, so I decided to play some games on here too. And I mean AAA ray trace games that you'd usually only play on PC, and I was pretty impressed. I'll put the Geekbench score on the screen now if it means anything to you. But the fact that I'm able to run Resident Evil Village with ray tracing and a pretty stable, what feels like more than 30 FPS, is pretty remarkable. I also tried COD Mobile to see if I can make use of that 120Hz screen, and it ran very well. Felt like 120Hz. Again, I have no way to prove this, but it definitely felt buttery smooth. It's also worth noting that my phone did get noticeably hot when I was playing Resident Evil, so when you play some demanding games, it will definitely cook your phone a little bit, but it wasn't anything too crazy. It was so tolerable. Regardless though, still impressed that I was even able to run the game. I've also had no problems with battery life. Basically full day battery, and I have pretty mixed usage because I commute, so lots of Google Maps and Bluetooth at the same time, plus some casual gaming like Clash Royale on the train, and maybe watching some YouTube even. And keep in mind this is the regular sized, not max phone. I also noticed that the phone seems to charge faster than previous iPhones, but seemingly only for the first half, and then it seems to slow down. I guess not to wear down the battery too much. I found that my iPhone 16 Pro tends to charge from 0 to 80% in just about an hour. Finally, that brings me to the final topic, the camera. This year, they gave the iPhone 16 Pro slightly different sensors and they're calling it the Fusion camera. Basically, the gist of it is this. The shutter speed is much faster, so capturing moving objects should result in better photos. The ultra wide is 48 megapixels now, so much more detail in the wide and macro shots. And they've also managed to bring 5x zoom to the non-max iPhone. That's important because before this year, the Pro only had 3 times optical zoom, whereas it was the Pro Max that had 5x optical zoom. They said this is because of packaging limitations, but they figured it out now and they're the same. Overall, the photos look really great. Obviously, I'll put photos on the screen here. Plenty of detail, and although I haven't been a fan of colors that usually come out of an iPhone sensor in the past, because of how customizable photographic styles are now, I can make it exactly how I want, so I'm very satisfied with the colors as well. The detail in nighttime photos are great as well, but the shutter speeds for night mode are not amazing. About expected because you need more light in your sensor during night, so you have to wait longer for a picture to be taken. It's also worth noting that the recent iPhone sensors have had this issue of this lens flare when light is hitting it at a certain angle. That issue is still there and you'll see it in some of my images. Overall, I think the photos really do look great, but to be honest, as someone who comes from a
480 Canadian dollar
Pixel 4a, which took pretty decent pictures, I'm not entirely convinced that these photos are still worth $1,500. Again, definitely the best photos I've seen from a smartphone, but the value is questionable is what I'm saying. Especially when the base iPhone will look pretty similar. Now when it comes to videos, it's even more impressive. As a lifelong Android user, I'm very pleased at how dependable and consistent videos on the iPhone are. Even in unideal conditions, they still manage to look decent and not a grainy mess, which is usually what I've been used to in previous phones. Editor me here. As I was editing this clip and I dragged this clip onto the timeline, I noticed that it actually separated audio into 5 different clips. Actual audio is only on the first track, so I'm not sure why it does this. I just thought it was worth noting. A cool new videography feature that the iPhone 16's got is called Audio Mix. Essentially, it can isolate what's in the frame versus what's in the background, and you can edit this in post. Now, a feature exclusive to the Pro phones this year is 4K 120fps. But good luck shooting 4K 120fps when the base storage is only 128 gigabytes. That is nothing. I've already filled up like 80 to 90 gigabytes and it's not even mostly photos or videos. 128 gigabytes at this price point is not acceptable. Now I saved the camera portion till the end of the video because it's basically the only reason to be getting the Pros. See, usually they give the new features to the Pro phone which trickle down to the standard phone next year. Like the dynamic island being on the 14 Pro, but not the regular 14. Or the action button being on the 15 Pro, but not the regular 15. So this year, the difference between the iPhone 16 Pro and the regular iPhone 16 is a lot smaller. They even share the same chip and RAM, the only difference being one less GPU core. I'll name all the differences now in what I think is of most importance to least importance. The 5x telephoto for better zoom. The new 48 megapixel ultra wide instead of the 12 megapixel. Ability to shoot 4K 120. Ability to shoot in ProRes and ProRAW. Having 4 mics instead of 1. Having a LiDAR sensor. And having an always on display. Other than that, they're literally the same phone. Well, Actually, classic Apple had to cheap out on some other stuff just to make it feel different. So the regular iPhones are still stuck at 60 FPS and only USB 2 file transfer speeds, which that one is very important to me since I plan on recording most of my videos with this phone. Overall, I just don't think that most people will care or will use any of the extra pro features. Even the high refresh rate, some people can't even tell the difference, which is wild to me. So if you're looking at the newest iPhones right now, I'd recommend for most people just to stick with the base phone. But even better yet, my actual recommendation is to just not bother at all right now, since their highlight feature, Apple Intelligence, isn't even finished yet, and we're so close to January, where Samsung will release their phones, so you might as well wait till they release, so you can compare properly with the latest version of Apple Intelligence and the iPhone versus Samsung's and Google's offerings.